Hello, I'm Kari Herbert and I'm a writer and an artist, a polar traveller, a mindfulness guide. I do lots and lots of different things. My father was a wonderful polar explorer who went to all sorts of places in the Antarctic and the Arctic. My mother was also a great traveller and writer as well. So yeah, we have a pretty special family. So my father was a polar explorer. He went down to the Antarctic in the 1950s and was one of the first men to map and chart huge areas of the Antarctic, and then went to the north and did an extraordinary journey across the top of the world. And he always wanted to be a polar explorer. Ever since he was a little boy, this was what he really wanted to do. And he followed that passion and he made it happen. And so he did everything he could to make his dream come true. And he met my mother, and she had all sorts of dreams of being on the stage and being a singer and a performer. And then she met my father and she thought, okay, this is interesting. And so when he said, when I was just a baby, let's go and live in the Arctic with a tribe of remote Inuit, she said, yes, okay, let's do it. So quite an intrepid pair of people, and who really always followed their passions in life. One of the things my father had learnt in the 1950s particularly, being sort of at the end of the heroic age of exploration, is that when you go travelling to somewhere wild and remote and beautiful, particularly somewhere where no one has ever been before, that you have a responsibility really to record it in some way. So that might be as a map, as a drawing, in writing, in whatever form that might be, photography, film now. But for him it was a very natural thing to do. He was actually a gifted artist and didn't realise that until much later. But creating maps perfectly, to really capture the sense of place and bring it home to people who might not be able to journey so far, or to explain what is at the far reaches of our known world. And that is a really special gift to have and to give to people. So if we can continue that feeling when we travel in this area of, we're not just experiencing it for ourselves. It's not just a place to tick off on your bucket list. It's about taking the time to absorb the feeling of a place and then sharing it with the people that you love, because this place really is so beautiful and it looks so amazing, but it's also fragile. And so we all need to be ambassadors for this extraordinary place. It's funny, so I first went to the Arctic when I was 10 months old, and I was very little. We lived there for 2.5 years on a remote island in northwest Greenland with just 12 hunting families on this tiny island. And people say to me, you can't possibly remember that time, you were so young. But I do have memories, I do, and there's one particular one which is my earliest memory. And I know it's my memory because my parents were asleep, so they can't have told me about it. And we were in our tiny hut on Herbert Island, and I was in my cot, and there was a huge Arctic storm. And so when you're in a polar storm in the winter, it is very frightening and very noisy. And there was a little ventilation trap that was making these really strange noises, and the wind was howling and screaming and everything was rattling. And I remember just standing and holding the edge of my cot and just kind of being aware of it, and just seeing my parents, and they were fast asleep. And I just remember just that feeling of it. And I don't remember being terrified, but I just remember the enormity of that moment. And there are other things too, and maybe they're from stories I've heard, I don't know, but that is my earliest memory, and I just think that's pretty special. So I had this wonderful opportunity to go back. We actually went back many times as I was growing up with my mum and my dad. We went back to Herbert Island, and there was always such this warm feeling of they're like family to me. I honestly thought that they were family, and they called me their little sister. And so going back has always been incredibly special. And then there was a long gap of time when I went to school and university, and then my dad said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to the Arctic. And he said, okay, well, I'm going up on a ship, a bit like this one, and you can come, but you have to organize it yourself. And I didn't know how, and he said, well, what do you like to do? He knew what I liked to do. And I said, well, I want to write and I want to take pictures. And he said, okay, ask a magazine, see if you can get a commission. And I did. And it was so lovely that he encouraged me to do it on my own, that he didn't just say, come on, I'll do it all for you. He said, no, you do it yourself. And so from that moment on, I just kept coming back. I knew how to do it, and so I could do it. And I became a travel writer, and I traveled the world, but always my heart is in northwest Greenland. It's just an amazing place. So of course, going back and forth to this particular settlement and to other settlements in West Greenland, Northwest Greenland, and now Northeast Greenland, I've seen the changes culturally and environmentally over the years, and it has been more dramatic than you can even really describe. Going from a hunting subsistence living where we had very small huts with no running water, no electricity, going out to the icebergs and collecting ice for our daily needs and using oil lamps, to just a couple of decades later of having internet and central heating and running water. It's just extraordinary. The ice is still collected, the water is still collected as ice from the icebergs, but it's by diggers, and it's a very modern community, completely connected with the rest of the world now. So that has its challenges as well as its benefits, and the culture is changing, but that's happening all over the world as well. So, but environmentally, I think that's the most striking thing, is the climate change is really, really affecting the hunting culture and just the general lives of people in the Arctic. So that's something that I can definitely attest to, that things are changing very, very rapidly. So the wives of polar explorers and polar travelers, their role is very underestimated. So I wrote a book about the wives of polar explorers, because I'd seen how my mother juggled so much when I was growing up, and particularly when we were in Greenland, my father would go off with the hunters to film them and write about them and photograph them and be away for weeks at a time. And we'd be at home in the community doing everything else, and just the sense of responsibility that the women have, not just for the children and the community, but also for the men, is so interesting and so extraordinary. So I spent 5 years researching the different women who were like the backbone of every polar explorer. The only one is Amundsen, who didn't need that. He was just an extraordinary human being. But all the other great polar explorers that we know had a very strong and extraordinary woman behind them, enabling them to do these incredible things. And also being a mother at the same time. So they're truly exceptional women. So this is a tricky one. What is the question that I would most like to be asked in an interview? I think it would be, what advice would I give myself as a younger person? I think that is a nice one that actually is quite good for all of us to ask ourselves sometimes when we get older. And the answer would be to just keep going and to believe in yourself, because I don't think we believe in ourselves enough, particularly women actually, and to follow your passion, to absolutely follow your passion. You still need to have bread on the table, of course, but life is such a gift. It is such a gift, and to have those times, those moments where you stop and breathe and connect to the present moment, and then life becomes so much richer. So it's okay to stop. It's okay to not go fast all the time and just appreciate. I mean, look at this. Appreciate the moment.